Thank you.
It's so exciting.
The book's a bit of a late bloomer. It came out 5 years ago, but here we are.
Everything in due time. We were just talking about this earlier, and I said, it's just such a topic that is taking a lot of time to unpack because there's so many different aspects of it, and there's so many complexities to this role. So I'm excited to get your perspectives on all this today, learn more about your research with the book, and just generally talk about women and money, and particularly for the allies in this room to also just understand some of the centuries-long habits that have been built into our gender. I think when we talk about breadwinning women, and this has come up a lot in our community, a lot of us didn't necessarily plan to have this role in our life. So I would love to hear from you, kind of what was your journey, what was your background, how did you find yourself in this position?
Oh my gosh, well, it's so great to be here. This has been a dream come true, and meeting you has been such, like you mentioned, I mean, it's hard, but not that hard. Once we start exposing ourselves as who we truly are as breadwinners in our families, we find that the community is actually big and diverse, and it's really important to just be proud of that, because through that comes such great relationships and growth. So I just want to say thank you to Bethany and for your mission here. This is so fantastic what you're doing. So personally, as you mentioned in my bio, I've been working in personal finance for a good decade. Almost 15 years, I've been dedicating my work to helping people, particularly women, become more confident and strategic around their personal finances. And so money is not taboo for me, especially because I also grew up in a Middle Eastern household. My parents talked about money a lot, the good and the bad. And so I grew up with this sort of fluency around money, and everybody knew me as like the girlfriend who will help you with your finances. So then I was about to get married, and my husband and I, at that point, my boyfriend, Tim, we sort of knew financially what we were facing as a couple. It was no secret that I was sort of on this upward trajectory in my career. I was an entrepreneur, so there was not really a ceiling to how much you can make. And I was very busy. It was the recession, and as a financial expert, that's actually a really great combination. I got laid off in the recession, but I was also pretty busy quickly after that. And things were really building. And my husband's a software engineer and was really passionate about working in startup land. So you can see sort of already there's going to be a gap. And he was fine with it, and he was excited about that. And back when I told him I wanted to write about this book, his first response was, "That's an amazing idea," as opposed to what I was worried what he was going to say was, "Are you going to write about us?"
Totally.
Which he would have been okay. It would have been okay for him to say that, because that's, I would have been a little afraid of that too. But why I wanted to write this book, it was my third book. I had been realizing that now 10 years into my career, my audience has really grown up with me. I wanted to dedicate a book for women, but I didn't want to write the sort of standard you go girl personal finance book, which there were a lot of those out there, and I was happy about that. But I thought what my 11th grade teacher always told me, my 11th grade English teacher, Mrs. Perchuk, she said, write what you know. Start with what you know, as opposed to writing what you think people want to hear. So I said, okay, what's going on in my life? What am I struggling with? And I was about to get married. And honestly, it kept coming back to the fact that I was the breadwinner. And even though in our relationship it wasn't a point of contention, I felt like it wasn't yet something that I could say out loud in public to others. And without sort of, a range of feedback. I did everything and anything from oh, that's interesting, to how does that work, to
how does that work?
Yeah, how does that work? How does your husband feel? What does your husband do? And so I was also insecure in this, in this reality that I was living, and I didn't like it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. I've been working in personal finance for 15 years now, and I'm pretty good at talking about money. And this is the first time I feel completely clammed up. And I want to explore this for myself, to kind of unpack this for myself. But I also think there's something here, because I have to believe I'm not alone.
No.
Right? And I have to believe that, and this book came out in 2014, but the idea was planted in me in 2011, 2012. And when I started pitching this book to the publishing world, I had an amazing agent. who believed in the idea. But when we started pitching it to publishers, I was shocked. Some of them were like, yes, this is great. And others were like, I think she's naive to think that this is even a problem. You know, I mean, think about New York City progressive women editors reading your proposal on like the complexity of being a female breadwinner, and you know, there's definitely a cohort of people out there that like refuse to believe that the fact that even you're addressing this is taking a step backwards.
Right.
That we should not position this as a potential complexity, because that's sort of like saying we can't do this. But no, we have to first sort of address the problem in order for there to be progress. So that was some of the feedback that I was getting in the beginning of pitching this book. But that was my kind of personal story behind it, was I personally felt like I didn't have answers and I wanted to find them. And through that came just so much research that was already out there that nobody was really piecing together. And then I did my own study. And then I interviewed, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of women and men who were, you know, in this reality, to come up with what I felt was at the time like a pretty healthy and foundational recipe for couples who want to thrive in this new paradigm.
Yeah, no, thank you for all of that and all that you've done. I think you highlighted so many important things in that intro, both the importance of needing the language around what this paradigm is and how we support it, how we understand it, how we share those views with people around us, but also the complexity of men and women and money. And let's go there a little bit, because it's definitely a thick conversation and it can get sticky. And I think it's really important for us to uncover. We've talked before. I always want to kind of fight the idea that being a provider for your home is solely a financial consideration, right? There's logistical provisions, there's emotional provisions, there's all these different ways. But as a society, we associate that with financial provisions, and we associate that with men. So there's been a lot of studies on how men and women think or talk or emote differently about money. Would love to hear your perspectives.
Sure. Yeah, there's a whole chapter in the book. It's called Cater to the Male Brain, which I got a lot of backlash on. But it's like, work with me here. You know, it's tongue in cheek, but the idea goes back to the fact that women and men, not that innately our brains are different when it comes to interpreting financial stuff, but that we've been conditioned so long that it's become sort of biological. You know, that we, for example, men, I was reading recently that there was a recent study where the middle part of the brain is where we derive a lot of our pleasure center of the brain. For women, when we do pro-social acts like donating money, that increases our happiness, our like excitement levels in the middle part of the brain more so than men. Whereas when men do sort of ego-driven things with money and profiting things with money, they see an increase in the middle of their brain of happiness and excitement. And so, and this is again because society has rewarded us differently, right? It's not because men are just, you know, innately this way, women are innately this way. It's just that this is how sort of we have bucketed everything. You know, women, you provide in the home and you get rewarded when you do things that are kind and socially driven and thoughtful, and selfless acts. Whereas men, you know, sort of being more of the financial providers, going out there, the hunters, sort of, you know, the leadership and all of that, we really celebrate that in men. And this is not me saying this is how it has to be. This is, like, as you mentioned, centuries and so many years of conditioning. I've learned that economists and behavioral scientists don't like the word hardwired. They, you know, because again, it's like it's not to be mistaken with like evolution. It's really just how we have designed the world, the patriarchy, so to speak, if you will. And so those are some pretty strong headwinds. And it's you know, it's an uncomfortable conversation. It's not a politically correct conversation to feel like you're having in a world where there's so much progress and there's so much want for progress. And so I wrote this book in 2014. It came out, and I said, I'll be the crazy woman to come out there and say these things. You know, that these aren't even my thoughts. These are like all science-driven facts that when men invest, they invest more aggressively. What does that mean? They love the thrill of investing. They love the thrill of trading, buying and selling. Women, we are a lot more thoughtful in terms of our approach. We want to buy and hold, and we actually outperform men in the market, which we don't talk about, but we do talk about how women aren't as risky. Well, actually, that pays off for us when it comes to investing. Women are more charitable with their money as a percentage of their income across all income levels than men. And so we do see these things, and I think it's important to address them, but at the core of it, I think what causes some of the complexities that we talk about in the book is just that men do associate this idea of providing with financially providing. That's exclusively it, like if you're going to be and to be a good man and a good father. We're having a lot of conversations today about what does it mean to be a good person, especially a good man in the wake of Me Too. We are very much still attached to these traditional values. And women too, not to say that this is all on men. I interviewed so many women, and again, myself too, like we arrive at this sort of unsettled and not feeling like we have a community, not feeling like we have had any modeling for what this is supposed to look like in a healthy way. And we feel like we have to overcompensate in the housewifery department. Do you find yourself cleaning too much? I did.
I did until we got through it. It's been a journey, right? It's been 12 years that I've been personally in my primary breadwinning role and almost 8 years in my sole breadwinning role. And it has been an evolution, but it is not what we expected when we walked down the aisle.
Right.
And that's where books like this and a community like ours really help you figure out kind of what some strategies are, what some languages are, what some of the struggles are. And
women do more housework when they make more.
I know.
It's because they try to make up for not feeling feminine.
I can think of so many other ways to feel feminine than doing housework. So many. So tell us a little bit about, so the book came out in 2014. It's now 2019. Like, what have you seen change? Are there any places where you feel like there's a different narrative that you would want to address, or anything that you've seen in terms of the reception of the message? What's changed?
It's been a steady climb in terms of how open we've become to talking about this and how we can't ignore it. When I first came out with this book, I'll give you an example. I was at a women's event, and there were a lot of different kinds of workshops and speakers, and I was speaking about this, and then there was, career strategy, and women love to get leadership. I find that when it comes to our self-development, we gravitate more towards books about career and self-development and leadership, which is great. But money, I don't know, there's a lot of fear perhaps with money. And I was signing my book at the end of this this big event, and the woman next to me had written a book about the confidence gap in women. And the line was out the door. There were women with 3 books, please, can you sign this for my mother and my sister? And here I was tapping my pencil and my pen, really crickets. And I was almost in tears. I was like, I wrote this book and nobody wants to buy it or read it. And the woman next to me who was signing away, she couldn't sign books fast enough. She's like, oh, you wrote this book? I love this book. I was like, well, you're just saying that. But okay, maybe you did really read the book. And then I see this woman coming and charging up ahead and got a book in hand. And I thought she was gonna have some beef with me or something. I read this book and can't believe what you said about cater to the male brain. And she slams the book on the ground. She goes, I drove here from Atlanta. We were in Boston.
Oh my gosh.
I wanted to meet you. You saved my marriage.
Oh.
And I was like, it's like God. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I was like, if there's a God, she heard me and sent this woman from Atlanta. Because I was ready to basically give up on this message. I was like, people don't want to hear it. I mean, listen, the media loved it. The media had a great time with this book, especially Fox News.
Oh, I bet.
With really mangling the message and being like, female breadwinners, that's a problem. Our guest today I'm like, no. I'm not saying it's a problem. We need to celebrate this. Can we go back? We're live. Okay, great. So it's been a journey. And that woman and women like that, and even men like that, the letters I get from sometimes the men who are in relationships, and they say to me, I never quite appreciated my wife in the way that I should have been, because I was so maybe caught up in how it was impacting my ego, or I internalized it so much, not realizing like she's going through so much of it as well. And your book has really allowed to be a bridge for us to talk about this, and and just thank you. And so those anecdotes have really kept me going. I've also learned a lot about myself after writing this book, whereas when I first came out with the book and I was going through all the PR and media, and people are like, why'd you want to write it? Or talk about your situation as being a breadwinner in your marriage, and I would say, oh, it just is what it is. Like, we didn't want for this, we didn't plan for this, it's just something that happens and we just have to be ready for it. But to be completely honest, I think what I've realized over the years, I think just because I've been doing a lot of self-reflection, I've been growing up and maturing, and I think that the reality is it's not a surprise that I'm the female breadwinner, because I grew up quite fearful of never having my own financial independence. And that determination in me that was sometimes very conscious, sometimes subconscious, but it definitely played a role in who I chose to marry and how much emphasis I put on my career and how much I made. And so, yeah, I could have married a billionaire perhaps, but would I have? I went on dates with a lot of Wall Street guys and I was very unattracted to them. And I think it was because they place so much emphasis on their money and career and bonuses and all the things. And I kind of did that on my own, and I felt like this is not going to be a symbiotic relationship. This is not going to be a collaboration, because I want kids, I want to keep working in my career, and I feel like if I'm going to be with this person, like it's your relationship is going to go through different variations, and someone's going to have a more high-charged career at one point, one person's going to be making more at one point, and I felt like if I married someone who made a lot more money than me, then it was necessarily going to push me down. Because there's no room for me to be me. Because society is just like, well, why are you working?
Right.
Your husband makes all this money. And it's like, I want to work. And so I was worried about that. And that may have been irrational, but that's just kind of I'm being really honest with you. That's the mindset that I had. And I think that it should not come as a shock that I am in a relationship like this. And I was telling you, like, it makes me feel safe. A lot of days. Yeah. Because I just know, I know where everything is. Yeah. I know where the money is. I know how much everyone's making. I feel as though I grew up in a family where that transparency wasn't there, because traditionally when you're the man and you're the breadwinner and you're the 1950s housewife and house husband, like, you just don't talk about money.
Right.
And that ends up being negatively impactful to the wife usually.
Yeah. You bring up so many great insights there, and I think the emotional ties that we all have to money, like I always think about when you go into a relationship, you have how you grew up and what your emotional language and identity may be with money based on how your parent or your caregiver handled money. And they're probably coming into it, if there's two of them, from two different sets of data points. And so when you enter into this partnership, it's not really something you talk about when you're dating. What's your emotional relationship to money, and is that compatible with mine? And are we, you think about, I remember my husband and I, when I first met him, I always, when I open a menu, immediately went to the price. And he always immediately went to, what do I want to eat? And that was really indicative of who we are as people and what is important to him and what he places value on and what is important to me and what I place value on. And I think that is ripe for friction.
Yes.
Particularly as you're also bucking all of these other social norms. And, like you said before, if you were dating a very wealthy married to a very wealthy Wall Street broker, everyone would be shocked that you would be working because you wouldn't have to.
Right. While you work.
Right.
That was an expression at my job. Like, I had this girlfriend, we used to sit next to each other, and she's like, it's such an inside joke, but basically she would go to her doctor, and he was this big, like, Upper East Side doctor, and his wife was in the office every day, but she just would, like, sort of greet everybody coming in. And my friend would go in for appointments, and she was the breadwinner in her family, and she was always a little bit frazzled and stressed, and she was like, why you work? Men work, women have the babies.
Oh my.
You know, like, but the menu story, I was at a restaurant one time with my husband overseas, and we get menus and there's no prices on my menu. And I said, Tim, is this like a prefix situation? Like, what's going on? He's like, what do you mean? I have prices on my menu.
No kidding.
Yeah, and so I asked the the female server to come over, and I was like, I just want to make sure I have the right menu because maybe this was like last season. I don't know what's going on. Like I did not even occur to me what was actually going on. And she was like, Madame, you do not have to worry about such things.
You know, we just went to the vet, and our vet, for some reason, we've been going multiple times recently with our dog. He always talks to my husband about work. And my husband's like, I don't know what he thinks I do. My husband's always wearing this like trucker cap from a local barber shop, and he's like, does he think I'm a barber? Like he's like always talking to my husband about work, and then just looks at me and tells me which medicines to give the dog. And he's like, why don't you correct him? I'm like, I just don't have the energy to do it every time. Like there's moments where I feel really, you know, that this needs to be course corrected and we need to have this conversation. And then there's other moments where I'm like, just give me the Advil and let me go.
Yeah.
But it is really shocking when those things come up. I want to just share with everybody, there are mics in the aisles if you want to come up and add to the conversation with some of your stories or questions for Farnoosh. I would love to, please feel free to step up and I will stop talking when you come to the mic. And we will edit all of that out before this goes live. I would just love to kind of understand, you know, we are in compensation planning cycle right now, as a lot of companies are at the end of the year. I read on your blog that you have had success in asking for raises and getting them. Mm-hmm. I know this is kind of a cliche question, but I feel like this is something we cannot hear enough. What are some of your approach recommendations? What are some of your advice or things that you've learned?
Well, one really tactical thing that I learned from my father was you should go and find out what your salary range is or your salary band. Have any of you done this? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, so great. Because for me, that was really helpful, not so much in getting the raise that I wanted at the job where I was at, although I tried to use that as leverage because I learned I was in like the 2nd percentile, like
oh my gosh.
After 3 years. I'm like, really? Okay. You know, I think that what I learned from that situation was get your information, do your best, but sometimes you're not going to get the raise and then you need to walk away. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like sometimes employers just aren't going to see your value, and it's like you can talk to them in every language as loud as you can, but they're not going to get it. So you have to decide how bad you want to stay there. And I decided to leave that job, but I still had that really, really valuable information with me, which was that I was making $45,000, but my job had the potential to make $85,000.
Whoa.
And I was at the lowest end of that scale. I was at I think it started at 44, and I'd been there for 2.5 years. Mm. Okay, all right, let's move on. How can we leverage this? So then I go to my next job opportunity and I'm negotiating. And I think the best time to negotiate is when you're getting a job offer, obviously, because you've gone through several rounds and now they really like you. And are they really gonna just call it quits because you're negotiating, which is what they, by the way, expect. So I asked to make $100,000 and they didn't, because I knew what the industry paid. You know, that's the other thing. Your salary range isn't just indicative of like your company, but probably you could extrapolate that to your industry. And depending on the size of your company, maybe it could be more or a little bit less, but that's a really great place to start. So I knew that the company I was applying to next was a wealthier company. They were a publicly traded company. They were a tech company. So I asked for 100, which was more than double what I was currently making, but pretty much around like the 85 that I would have potentially made at my other job. And the manager said, well, we can't do that right now. How about 85? Perfect. And I said, and he's like, and then in 6 months, we can revisit your compensation. And I said, how about 90? And I won't bother you in 6 months. Because you know I will. I will be that person who's like, remember when you said, I'm recording this conversation. So I think it's about going back at least a couple of times and doing that dance, and not, so if and knowing what you really want to make, and of course, not trying to be taking the emotion out of it is really important, because I know these days, on the one hand, we like to have all this transparency and we're learning how much people are making, but don't make it just about that, about, well, this person is making more than me. And I mean, that maybe should be part of the narrative, but I don't think that's all you lead with, right? You want to lead with every single data point that you have that shows your value and how you're adding to the bottom line and how you've developed, provided growth. And I think maybe not this compensation period, because maybe you're just learning this, but if you know this is what they need. You need to make their job easy for giving you a raise, is how I've always thought of it, right? They need to basically go to the next person, like their higher up, to advocate for you. So put everything on a silver platter for them. Give them the metrics, show them the growth, quantify everything as much as you can. Because I think your loyalty is not what's not being proven at this point. It's just they want to make sure that they can get an ROI on what you're asking for. So that's always been how I've thought about it. And I just recently negotiated. This is just my experience, and I don't work in corporate. I'm like an independent contractor, but I recently got asked via email to speak at an event for women's empowerment, and they offered me $500. And I said, I was like, okay, I really want to do this. This is like a great opportunity to meet some amazing women. I really appreciated the organization. I really liked the founder. And I went back and I said, I was very fair about it. I was like, I really want to do this. This sounds great. Here's what I normally make, and I understand that you're a startup and I don't expect you to pay me all of that, but can we so I negotiated back and forth, and what I did was I basically got up to about $4,500.
Oh, wow.
After 2 emails, because I said to them, look, I was only going to be on a panel, so it wasn't like I had to prepare that much, and it wasn't a keynote. But I also said, look, I'm going to bring you all this value. I'm going to share this with my followers. I'm going to bring on the founder of your organization onto my podcast. We're going to make this really a win-win. And they didn't get back to me for about 12 hours, but that's usually a good sign that they're ruminating. And I was able to get that, which I felt was a fair price, because it was, on a weekend, and it was in my neighborhood. It was I was getting a lot out of it too, but I also had to realize I need to give back. If I'm going to ask for 10 times what they were initially going to offer me.
It's so interesting. I've heard twice recently, within the past 3 weeks, that women aren't motivated by money. And I was like, first of all, I'm the wrong person.
They're interviewing
for you to
the
be
wrong
saying
women.
this too. I'm like, this is not. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, this is.
What is that question, by the way?
Just
here's the
more
thing.
That they've heard this as people say it as a statement of fact, and
then we hear that, and then we think that's how we should feel.
Right.
It's this perpetuous cycle. And I think that sometimes I wonder about these surveys, because how are they asking the question?
Right.
I think that if you asked any woman, do you want to be financially empowered, right? Do you want to make money so that you can, right, support yourself, support your family, leave a financial legacy, give back? That's speaking my language, and I think sometimes when we talk about money in our current capitalist society that's male dominated, that's a patriarchy, we think money is a man's territory, and that it's not for me, because it's all been packaged and marketed and made by men, and so we don't feel very much like we belong in that world, and sometimes we can feel like imposters. And if someone's asking us if we like money, we probably should say no.
Right. There's that implication that it's dirty,
yeah. But women should be unapologetic about wanting money, wanting to be rich, liking money. Yeah. Come on.
I love money. I also think, I do.
We're done here.
But I also think the more we talk about it, the more comfortable we get with talking about it. So when you're going into these negotiations, and internally here it's a little bit different for those of us at Google, but when you're talking about promotion or potentially being put on a new project, all of that is a negotiation. And so the more you are comfortable with outlining what your value is, where your passion is, where you want to be the most valuable, where you want to be an expert, and say it with your girlfriends, say it over coffee, say it over lunch, say it with some close friends and colleagues. You will be so much more comfortable when you're saying this to your higher ups because you've already convinced yourself and you know this is true, but you don't have that many opportunities to say it. So I think the practice and the comfort with some of this, going back to the language, is really important. And I think, starting this community has been very eye-opening for me in terms of who identifies as a breadwinner. And it's not just necessarily hetero couples with children. We have a variety of different women in different situations, household makeups that consider themselves female breadwinners. And, you realize that when there's ways where people have questioned, do you lead with this, oh, I'm leading my household financially, therefore I need all these things. And we've had a recent conversation here around kind of compensation, and you're supposed to not take into consideration somebody's household situation in terms of how you consider their comp, of course. But do we? Yes. Right? When you see a father of 4, do you assume that he is more financially responsible for his household than the mother of 4? That maybe he's more dedicated to his career than she is? These types of biases exist, and we all have them. I've misstated things a million times in my life, and I'm sure I'll do it again. So we all have something in us that is going to drive certain decisions that we make. And I think that to me, I just don't have shame in being the breadwinner. Obviously, it's very clear to most of my managers that I'm the breadwinner in my family. You have to do what's comfortable for you within the workplace. But that's why I think what Farnoosh is saying in terms of what your value is, what your goals are, what you've brought, what your ROI is, that's what every business person understands.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. Again, we have a question.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Nicolette. I really love this so far, so thank you for joining. So I am also a child of immigrants, Nigerian immigrants, so I'm sure the same thing. I've been focused on financial independence my whole life since I started working for my family's business at like 8 years old. And so I recently graduated with my MBA. So that's kind of the context. But my overall question is, when you are doing the merging of finances with a partner. So my husband and I have been married for 3 years, but with going to school and stuff, we weren't fully joined. And now we're going into this joining process, and he's a lot more laid back than I am. And so just general tips for when that joining happens, and then the reality of I only got a half ride to my program, so 6 figures of student loan debt. How do you kind of talk about tackling that? Because I do take it as my responsibility, and I want to put all the loan, money towards the loan, but my husband is making money. And so is it his money? Is it our money? So any kind of insight into that?
I have lots of ideas about this. Yeah. Well, thank you for your question. And I'm sure a lot of us are curious to hear how this should operate. There's no absolute best way to do this except for this. I will say that transparency is really important. So at the very minimum, we all need to get really clear on who's making what kind of debt are we talking about, what's the interest rate on that debt, who owns that, where's that debt paycheck going? It's not enough to just know that my husband has student loans, but what is the monthly payment? Where are you writing the check to? What is the interest rate? When does it expire? Get some of these basics figured out in the open, and that's number one, because you can't really make any decisions in the dark, right? You have to kind of know what the reality is that you're facing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I don't think that everything needs to be combined. That's not how we do it in my household. And I used to think that my way was the best way, but I really think that at the end of the day, you have to do what works best for you. If that transparency is really what's the underpinning. And I think any system should work fine theoretically, but in my relationship, again, because I'm a little bit of a psycho, I like to have my money, his money, our money. We see everything. We know all the passwords to all the things. We use different sharing platforms so that we can watch everything on our, on a shared platform. But when it comes to debt, I feel as though, again, this is where you really have to kind of go where you feel comfortable. And I would just caution that, and I would say this to your husband if it was his debt, I'd say to you, just make sure that this doesn't become your debt, technically speaking. That you can contribute to this debt as a couple, and that can probably get it out of the way, out of the picture faster. But just be careful that you don't become a co-borrower, co-signer, that people are under the assumption that if you get divorced, your husband's debt becomes your debt de facto. Like you split that in a divorce proceeding. You don't. If your name is not on the debt, it's not your debt. At the same time, if your name is not on your mortgage, like your deed, actually, you don't own your home. A lot of people, sometimes I wrote this article about things that you just need to know in your relationship about money. If you know nothing, because you're that person who doesn't want to talk about money, head in the sand, they exist, and I empathize. But here's what you absolutely need to know. You need to know what your partner makes, and how that person makes their money. Because when tax time comes around and you're both signing the tax return, you're both on the hook, right, for the honesty of that tax return. And sometimes when, there's dishonest players in a relationship, that can come back to haunt you. Secondly, knowing who owns what, and making sure that there is some separation if you want that separation, right? So sometimes you unknowingly refinance some debt in your relationship that started out as one person's and now it's everybody's, two people's. So just make sure that you're not, if that's not what you're okay with, that you are very much at the forefront of that refinancing and you know what's going on. I would also say that having a financial advisor in the mix at some point can be helpful. And we had one person in the beginning of our relationship who was very instrumental in laying out all that transparency so that I didn't feel like I kept nagging my husband to can I get the password to your, Chase account already? It was where we had this person it was her job, right, to make sure that we got certain things done, and we did what she wanted us to do. We were paying her, so we wanted to make sure it got done. And this person helped us get transparent, understand what kinds of holes we had in our financial life. You don't have enough life insurance. You need to get a 529 plan because you're going to have a kid next year. You should really be maxing out your 401k at work, Tim. And so again, this isn't stuff that I was having to tell him. This CFP lady who was very, talented and all the things, she was, I'm very expensive, so we better listen to her, and she got us on a really great plan that a lot of it was automated. And so eventually I kind of graduated out of that. And now we just do it all ourselves, and it's great. But we may again work with a financial planner down the road when we feel like our finances have now gotten to another complex level, or we can't, we want to make sure that we are actually still on the right track, because maybe it's been now 10 years and we want to reset. And there are, XY Planning Network is a great website if you want to find a financial planner that is fee only. So there's a lot of traditional planners will charge you 1.5% of your underlying assets. But for younger people who are starting out in their careers, we don't have that kind of wealth yet. And so we feel like we don't qualify at all for financial planning advice. But that's a misnomer. Yes, that sort of cottage industry exists, but there's also a new breed of financial planners that work with their clients on a monthly retainer basis, hourly fee basis, much like you would work with a tax accountant, someone, or a lawyer. And I think that if you just kind of want someone to work with for the first couple months, just to make sure here's the checklist, that could be a great investment.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And it takes that emotional piece out, having that independent third party.
But why I like the 3 buckets, mine, yours, ours, is because each person can have financial autonomy. I cannot tell you how many fights ensue when there's only one pot. And then I want to get a haircut and we have to have a conversation.
Right.
Because I want to get I want to get lower head highlights. Is he going to be okay with that? Because it's going to be a few $100s, and it's you can just avoid these conversations when you have your own money. And again, you've agreed upon this. It's not hidden money. It's not, in a Swiss bank account. It's just siloed. Or maybe you're just taking out the cash every week and that's your money to enjoy.
Yep. Great. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Roya, and I just wanted to say this is so much fun, so thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
So similar to you, I grew up in a Middle Eastern household.
Iranian?
And Iranian, yes. And my father kind of just always had a very unhealthy relationship with money. We always heard when we didn't have money, when there wasn't enough money, when we need money,
Scarcity.
how can we get more money? Yeah. So I grew up being like, I need to save all of my money. I need to be self-sufficient. So if I get $10, save 9 of it. But as someone who is early on in their career, I was just curious to know how, because I kind of have this instilled fear with not having enough money because of my dad. So how do you suggest kind of getting over that fear? How do you have any tips of like, as someone early in the career to save money, and then because I'm unmarried, so when that gets to that point, you know,
What are you afraid of? What's the fear of?
that I'll just like have
Becoming a
nothing
bag lady
someday. I don't know. I'm also afraid that I'll end up with someone who has a bad relationship with money, like my dad, because my mom was very self-sufficient and ended up with someone like that who.
Have your fears ever transpired?
No.
Okay. So that's all you need.
But I'm very young. They have time.
Yeah. And you're Persian, so you'll always look young. So,
Oh, great. Thank you.
well,
It's a bunch of questions.
although I am looking at, I'm like, is there an app that just shows your face on Botox? I just want to see. I'm asking for a friend. I want to tell you that there's nothing to be worried about, but that's not really a realistic answer. But I would say that a good way to kind of get a sense of whether you're on the right track, which I think is what you're kind of, you would appreciate that. Like you just want to know you're doing the right things. Mm-hmm. And so how old are you?
23.
23. Okay. And so you have a 401k. Does Google have a match?
Yes.
You're matching. You're doing that. Do you have a rainy day account?
A ring of what?
A rainy day account?
Oh, yes.
If you lost your job tomorrow, God forbid,
We're
could
good.
you pay? You're good for how long?
Amazing.
I would say at least a year.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Again, get 10,
Fantastic.
save 9. So.
And so you've got the retirement, you've got the rainy day account, you've got a great job, you've got your youth.
Maybe also, so we talked about
So go
trading and stocks
have
and
a nice
stuff. Yeah.
dinner tonight with your girlfriends. You know, like I think that here's how what helps me feel secure is I do the boring stuff first when I get paid. Right? I pay into my savings. I pay into my retirement. I pay into my tax account. I pay for the needs. I just make sure that, you know, we are paying for all of the monthly recurring costs that we need to before, so we don't get in trouble. And then whatever's left, I know that this is money that I can sort of play with, and I have discretion now with this money. And so that's always a good way to check in with yourself. Are you doing these things that you're supposed to be doing firstly, and then with whatever's left, have the confidence to know that you can screw around a little bit. You know, you can go on a vacation, you can go on a nice dinner, you can you can give to charity and all the things that you want to do with your money. And if you're still feeling insecure and having this feeling of scarcity, then I do think that it's not even about the money anymore. It's about something deeper and therapy. I mean, don't laugh. I mean, there's financial therapists out there. There's Talkspace. There's all Headspace, whatever it's called. Like you kind of want to get to the underlying root of it. And you know, I'm almost 40, and I'm still trying to figure some of my money, not my money issues out, but some of the underlying experiences that I had growing up. I call it a healthy state of panic that I was raised with. Like you're talking about this like fear of money, you know, that was kind of my upbringing too, was like we had sometimes we didn't others, and it was like a lot of volatility. And I think it's not a coincidence that I grew up to be the person that I am. So own who you are. It's great that you have all this money.
Sure.
I will also, if I can please plug, the benefits here are unbelievable, but you get free, unlimited one-on-one coaching with ACO. Use it. They know everything about the benefits that we have here. They will help you figure out, like you're saying, the life insurance, the 401k match.
Does everyone know what ACO is?
AYCO. Just go /ACO, unlimited.
Oh my gosh.
Free, one-on-one. It's a fantastic benefit. Honey, you're going to be fine.
I know. It's more so worried for like, how do you save for what you don't know you want in 10 years, you know?
Yeah.
Just
Things
save
like
it.
that.
Don't worry
Okay,
about
okay, we're fine.
putting a label on it, you know?
Yeah.
There are a lot of, so if you know that you don't want to touch this money for 5 years or more, I think you're okay to invest it. And there are a lot of ways you can go out there and invest, right? Portfolio platforms, there's automated platforms out there, like so many brokerage firms, low fee, and just get on in an index fund and just ride it out. And then when you get more clarity around where your life's headed, because you're right, you don't know, and that's kind of fun, but don't and not at the expense of not saving, right? So continue to invest for those unexpected great joys you want to have in your later 20s and early 30s, because you won't regret it, you know, or put a label on it now, and then if it changes, so what? The money's still there.
Totally. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
We have time for one more question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nicole. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
A quick question I have is regarding being a mom and also breadwinner. So my husband and I, we are very, work really well with each other. I don't really feel any society pressure, all of that. Now we have a 1-year-old. I see myself taking on more really because of my own, control sake. I know I am better at preschool research and making doctor appointments and all of these things. And do you have any practical tips for sort of the pressure that you put on yourself for wanting to control everything in your household?
So you had Eve Rotsky, right?
Yes.
Come join.
Yes.
And I was
just thinking of her with this question. Yeah.
So I address this in my book, and I have a little section about how you really should think of your, again, because household duties, as the breadwinner, there's this tendency to kind of take on more because of you feel like you have to overcompensate in that department. It's psychological. You become a mom and it only compounds. You're at the forefront of parenting and work and earning and all of it. So we have this tendency, I think, sometimes to just ask for help when we should just say, here, all of it. Please take care of all of this. Let me know if I can help you with anything once or twice a year. So
does that not give you personal, for me, I try, but it gives me anxiety. So I think it's something I have to sort of let go.
Let go.
I don't know if you have any practical tips.
You just
teach a man to fish.
Yeah.
Right? There's no way you're better at making a doctor's appointment than he is. You may do it on a different timeline, but I guarantee you execute equally.
And the kids are going to be okay.
Yeah.
If that's the thing to remember. You married a capable, resourceful person, maybe not to the type A-ness that you are, or this, but the job will get done. Done is better than perfect.
Yes.
Right?
One of my favorite
and
mantras.
you will I would just say try it. Yeah. And I know it's going to be hard in the beginning, but I think you'll very much appreciate the freedom that comes with it too. It's going to be maybe tense at first, but also and appreciate what it's also giving you, this gift of your time back. And the fact that you don't have to be thinking about this while you're doing all of this. And it's just a process you have to go through, and finding other women to connect with, to commiserate, and share tips on. But done is better than perfect. Eve Rotsky's book, which is called Fair Play, which talks about accountability versus asking for help. And this idea of, in a partnership, it's not about trying to achieve parity with all your work and housework, but it's about, doing what each person does best or just wants to do, or in some cases has more time to do, and that's it, and owning that piece of it. So in my book, the couples that talked about that with specificity, there was one female breadwinner who said, I just gave my husband the entire department of food. So it's not can you pack John's lunch? I forgot. No, he's doing the grocery shopping, the food planning, the grocery shopping, the meal planning, knowing what we're running low on, knowing what everyone's dietary needs are. That's on him. And so, oh my gosh, that's 800 hours a year that you just opened up for yourself. And you're still eating the right foods. Nothing really changed, except that you have better skin.
Yep.
And you're sleeping better at night.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Listen, Farnoosh, you have so much going on between writing and your financial pop-ups and your podcast, which is amazing. I encourage you all to subscribe. What are you most excited for coming up in 2020?
I'm excited for more conversations like this. Honestly, you know, I want to make 2020 the year where I really go, you know, just seriously, like this is the year to really amplify the celebration that needs to happen with female breadwinners. You know, I feel like the time is now. I mean, 2020 is the time for a lot of things. It feels like it's the beginning of a new decade and a new year but given the momentum that this has really taken on this year, I feel like 2020 is going to just be a busier year on this topic, and I hope to be in partnership with you doing more of those things. So whatever that looks like, whether that's events or programs or like, I don't know, maybe there's like another version of this book. I don't know. What's that?
Maybe it's V2.
Yeah, maybe it's version 2. I've always wanted to write from the perspective of husbands as well. I bought the domain When He Makes Less.
Oh, interesting.
.com when I first came out with the book. It may have expired, I don't know. But I think I think we need men to be a part of this conversation. You know, right. I think like any movement, it's not just about the disenfranchised groups' issues and how we need to help them, but it's like, how do we make this a global issue? When we win, everybody wins, right? So I think we need to make this more of an inclusive conversation, and I look forward to being a part of that.
I couldn't agree with everything you said more. You guys can follow Farnoosh on Instagram or Twitter. Like I said, sign up for her podcast. She will be available to sign the book plates if you'd like, and your books will be delivered in mid-January. We have all your information. So Farnoosh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This was amazing.
Thank you.